John Morton, man, Johnny's a superstar now, and there's a number of things that he did for us last year that are things that we've kept.
The Detroit Lions have swiftly replaced both coordinators after the departure of Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. One clear choice from within and one familiar face from the outside. Welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Johnny Gaz. Thank you for returning for another video. The Lions have hired former senior offensive assistant and pass game coordinator most recently with the Denver Broncos, John Morton. Let's get back into our coach profile series and dive into the Lions' new play caller. Let's go. As with all the profile series videos here on the channel, let's first take it back. John Morton was born September 24th, 1969. He is originally from Rochester Hills and Auburn Hills, Michigan. He attended Avondale High School, ended up going to Grand Rapids Community College, and ended up at Western Michigan University, where he played wide receiver. He went undrafted in 1993, but ended up playing 4 professional football seasons in the NFL, the Canadian Football League, as well as the European Football League. After his professional football career was over, John got into coaching, got his first job with the Oakland Raiders under John Gruden as an offensive assistant, ended up as a tight ends coach. He spent from 1997 all the way to 2004 with the Oakland and then Las Vegas Raiders. In 2005, John Morton took a job with the University of San Diego under head coach Jim Harbaugh as an offensive assistant. He then moved back to the NFL, to the New Orleans Saints in 2006 under head coach Sean Payton, and with the success there, was able to parlay that into the University of Southern California, where he spent 2007 to 2010 as an offensive pass game coordinator as well as offensive coordinator and worked with the wide receivers. He then went back to the NFL in 2011, again under Jim Harbaugh and the San Francisco 49ers, where he spent from 2011 to 2014. He then goes back to the New Orleans Saints in 2015, where he spends multiple seasons, again under head coach Sean Payton, but also worked with Motor City Dan Campbell. Due to the success again in New Orleans with the offense there and spending time with Dan Campbell and obviously under the tutelage of Sean Payton, John Morton accepted a job with the New York Jets as their offensive coordinator, which only lasted for 1 season. He was really given a tough go at it with the talent that he had in front of them and unfortunately was let go the following offseason. From 2019 to 2021, he went back to Oakland, which then turned into the Las Vegas Raiders as a senior offensive assistant, started under, again, Coach John Gruden. As we know, Dan Campbell took over as head coach of the Detroit Lions in 2021 and had an opportunity to form his own coaching staff. Because of the time in New Orleans with John Morton, he then hired John Morton to come over to the Lions organization as a pass game coordinator and assistant and worked heavily with the offense, implementing the Dan Campbell and what ended up being the Ben Johnson system, becoming very familiar with Jared Goff and the pass game for the Detroit Lions.
They've done a tremendous job offensively. Johnny Morton, our passing game coordinator, was just there a year ago. Dan hired Ben to coordinate the offense, and he's been fantastic. They run the ball out of 2-back sets, which I like. And you see that they get to certain menus to take advantage of what they're seeing. A couple runs, 3 passes. They're very detail-oriented. You see it on tape. They're well coached.
As Dan Campbell said in our opener, John Morton formed a good relationship with a lot of people here in Detroit and did a lot of good things with the offense and Jared Goff. Because of that, he ended up being hired by Sean Payton again in Denver. Spent multiple seasons there, 2023, 2024 as their pass game coordinator. And again, under that tutelage of Sean Payton, which sort of opens up this whole tree with Motor City Dan Campbell, obviously Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, who have now moved on to other jobs. Now the Lions have an opportunity to bring John Morton in again with this familiarity with the system, the quarterback, a lot of the offensive philosophy they've already been running, and is now the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions as we head into this 2025 offseason. Punch it in. What's next for John Morton, the Lions offense, and the Detroit Lions organization as a whole. I think the first thing is getting back into the familiarity with the offensive system. What will change now with the implementation of John Morton as offensive coordinator? He is, from my outside perspective, a little bit more pass heavy. I think he'll certainly utilize the play action, but I think you'll see a lot less empty set, a lot more reliance on the wide receivers. He comes from that background. He's a wide receiver at heart. He was a wide receiver at Western Michigan University and spent a lot of time as a coach throughout not only the college system, but the pro systems here under tutelage of Sean Payton, everything we've talked about. So he'll bring a lot of expertise to that unit alone. How will that then affect the Lions offense as a whole? So I think the most important thing is, how will his philosophy affect what the Lions currently have, and how will that then change not only the roster, but the coaching scheme as we move into this offseason?
Morton was the Denver Broncos passing game coordinator this past season, but spent the 2022 season in Detroit on Dan Campbell's staff as the team's senior offensive assistant. So Morton, he's familiar with how this offense runs. He's a Metro Detroit native, and he played 2 seasons at Western Michigan. Now he returns to Michigan, looking to keep the Lions offense running as one of the best in the NFL.
I think it's very important that John Morton has that familiarity with Jared Goff. And Dan Campbell has talked about the continuity importance as the Lions move out of this past season and into the offseason as we head into 2025, 2026. The fact that John Morton's familiar with Goff, he understands, I believe, his strengths and his weaknesses. The fact that this team is so reliant on the offensive line, the rushing attack, I don't think he's going to stray away from that. But I think he's going to ultimately take his familiarity with Jared Goff in his past, use what he's been able to pull out of the systems under Sean Payton in New Orleans, John Gruden in Oakland and Las Vegas, and then again under Sean Payton in Denver, and really carry on what this Lions offense has been these last few seasons. They've been a top offense, if not the top offense in football here in 2024. I'm sure John Morton's goal is to maintain that, if not open up some of the possibilities here with the talent that they have. And with all that, there will be some changes. It won't be an exact carbon copy of the Ben Johnson offense. We saw some of the downfalls or pitfalls to that in this loss to Washington. And I don't mean to spotlight that as an overall arching effect on Ben Johnson and his time here in Detroit. I've talked about, we're very grateful for what he's done for the Lions offense, the organization as a whole, and we are glad that he's moving on to a good situation in Chicago and wish him the best, except when he plays the Lions 2 times a year. But ultimately, there will be some changes as John Morton installs his version of that offense. And one of the key pieces will be the free agent players that the Lions have coming up. They're really going to have to address the current free agent allotment that they have, who's going to stay, who's going to go. We've spotlighted a couple players on offense, and especially the offensive line, Kevin Zeitler, the guard, the wide receiver, Tim Patrick, along with some other pieces there. And I'm going to do a full video on a should they stay or should they go with the Lions' current list of free agents. So look out for that. We will hit that in detail. But I think that's going to be a major part of the transition for John Morton. What players will stay? Do they need to look outside of the organization and bring in a free agent piece here and there to fill any holes that may be left over? And then from that point on, it's kind of gearing up towards the draft. Who did they not bring in? What holes are left over? And how can Brad Holmes then supplement the offensive roster to really take this to the next level and make it what John Morton sees for the future? I do expect the draft approach to be very defensive heavy. We know the Lions don't really love to make major splash moves. They are very based off of the draft, building internally, players like Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, among so many others. And we've talked about that in past videos, the culture built on the draft and built on these pillar players. Well, the Lions have shown that they really like to take chances on one-year deals, kind of a low-risk, high-reward situations, and it's paid off in some cases, and it hasn't in others. But ultimately, I think the real true turnover problem for this Lions team is on their defense. So in turn, I expect the draft to be defensive heavy, but we know the Lions will take best player available. Jahmyr Gibbs is a shining example of that and has turned himself into one of the best running backs in all of football. So will there be a piece available in the draft that they can grab that will supplement this offense? It'll be interesting to see, very exciting as the Lions move into the offseason. Overall, I think this is a really good move for the Detroit Lions. I think it works schematically. I think John Morton's familiarity with Dan Campbell, the offense, Jared Goff, the system, and hopefully the culture under that tutelage of Sean Payton and everything that Dan Campbell's brought to Detroit and everything they formed over these last several years, I think that familiarity and continuity will mean so much as the Lions get into the offseason and head into next year. I think they'll have a very clear picture on what it's going to take to get to the next level. We saw what happened against Washington in the playoffs, even after a 15-2 season, after a number 1 seed. It just wasn't enough. There's a ton of defensive questions about injured players, about what they do with free agents, how will the draft supplement the defense and the offense, and everything it will take for the Lions to get over the hump to a Super Bowl and ultimately the ultimate prize. And I think this move for John Morton, everything they've done so far since the Washington loss, seems to lean in that direction. Thank you guys so much for returning for another video. I appreciate your time so much. If you dig the vibe here at Johnny Gaz Sports, make sure to hit that like button. It's the best free way to help out the channel. I'd love it if you consider subscribing. We're now on the road to 3,000 thanks to you guys. And if you hit the notify bell, you don't miss any future videos. I do have a membership option available. That's where I do my live game play-by-plays, a ton of other fun stuff. But there's always free content here for you all the time. More than anything else, take care of yourself. Take care of that mental health. It's so important. I want to make sure you come back and see me on future videos. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Go Lions.